The morning began with an uneasiness that neither of them dared to name. The silence in the apartment felt heavier than usual. The kind that settles in after too many conversations that end without resolution. Jenny moved through the kitchen slowly, pretending to look for something in a drawer she'd opened 3 times already. She could feel Sumat watching her, waiting for her to speak first. But she didn't want to be the one to break the quiet again. Every word between them lately seemed to turn into something sharp. He finally approached, hesitant, as if stepping toward her might set off another emotional landmine. He didn't reach for her hand like he normally would, and that distance, small but undeniable, made her chest tighten. She felt him studying her face, searching for a hint of what she was thinking, but she kept her expression still. Inside, though, she was unraveling. She'd spent the entire night replaying the last argument in her head, listening again to the tone he'd used, the doubts he tried so hard to hide, the hesitations he thought she didn't notice. She walked past him toward the window just to put space between them. From there she could see the street outside, busy, loud, full of people moving with purpose. She wondered what it would feel like to be one of them, someone whose life wasn't tied to constant uncertainty. Someone who didn't have to defend her decisions every time she took a breath. Behind her, Sumat let out a long sigh, the kind that carried more apology than words ever could. But she didn't turn. She couldn't, not yet. He stepped closer but stopped halfway, sensing she wasn't ready. His mind raced with all the things he should say, the reassurance she kept asking for, the promises he meant but always struggled to deliver. He watched her shoulders rise and fall with quiet frustration. And the fear that he was losing her sat like a weight on his chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught. The air between them seemed to thicken with everything left unsaid. Jenny finally exhaled and closed her eyes. The exhaustion in her bones wasn't just from last night, it was from months, maybe years, from trying to hold on to something that felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that things would get better. But she could no longer ignore the twisting in her stomach each time he paused before answering a simple question. The doubt was growing louder when she turned toward him at last. Her eyes were softer but sadder. He took a step forward instinctively, ready to close the gap, thinking maybe this was the moment they could finally breathe again. But she lifted her hand not to touch him, but to stop him. The gesture hit him harder than any argument they'd ever had. Her voice came out quiet, but steady enough that he immediately understood something had shifted in her. She wasn't accusing, she wasn't angry, she was tired. And he felt that weariness like a cold wave washing over him. He knew she wasn't trying to hurt him. She was trying to protect herself. The room went still again. Only this time, the silence didn't feel temporary. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them were prepared to face. The tension from the morning lingered like smoke that refused to clear. Even as the day pushed forward, the weight of what had happened, what hadn't been said, what both of them feared hung in the air with a sharpness they couldn't escape. Jenny moved through the small apartment as though she were moving through someone else's life, not hers. Every familiar object felt strange now, carrying memories that suddenly felt fragile. She kept touching things absent-mindedly, a mug, a curtain, the edge of the sofa, as if grounding herself in the only space she had control over. Sumat watched her from the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He kept telling himself he needed to say something, needed to clear the fog between them before it turned into a storm neither of them could survive. But each time he stepped forward, the words dissolved before they reached his tongue. He couldn't understand how they had arrived at this point. He loved her. He thought that was enough. But lately it felt like love alone was failing them. Jenny finally sat on the couch. Not because she wanted to rest, but because her legs felt weak. The emotional exhaustion had caught up to her. And she didn't know if she could handle another conversation that left them both feeling worse. She stared at her hands resting in her lap, noticing how they trembled slightly. She pressed them together to stop the shaking. She didn't want him to see, didn't want to reveal how deeply this was affecting her, but he saw anyway. He always noticed the small things, the tightening of her jaw, The way her shoulders curved inward when she felt unsafe, the hesitation in her steps. His chest ached with guilt. He hated that he had become the source of the very insecurity he'd promised to protect her from. Quietly, he moved closer and sat across from her, leaving enough space so she wouldn't feel cornered. He looked at her profile, searching for an opening, some sign she still wanted to hear him. She didn't turn to him, but she didn't move away either. That alone felt like a fragile invitation. He started softly, almost whispering, "I know you're upset. I know I've made things harder than they need to be." His voice cracked slightly, betraying how close he was to breaking. "I never wanted to make you feel like this." Jenny kept her eyes on the carpet. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice steady when she finally answered. "It's not about wanting to feel this way. It's about what's real. About what keeps repeating." Her words weren't sharp, but they were painfully honest. He felt each one like a blow. She continued, still not looking at him. "I've tried so hard to ignore the things that scare me. The hesitations, the delays, the excuses. But I'm tired, Sumat. I'm so tired of pretending I don't see what's right in front of me." He didn't interrupt. He couldn't. Her voice held a truth that demanded silence. She finally lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes weren't angry. They were filled with a quiet resignation that made him tense with fear. "I can't be the only one fighting for this. I can't be the only one who feels the consequences every time something goes wrong." He leaned forward, desperate now. "You're not. I swear you're not. I've been trying, Jenny. I've been trying so hard." She shook her head slowly. Trying without action isn't enough anymore. The words struck him deeply, harder than she expected. His throat tightened, and he looked away for a moment, battling the sting of shame rising inside him. He wanted to defend himself, to explain everything she didn't know. But every explanation he had felt like another excuse. The room grew heavy again. The sunlight that had once filled the apartment began to fade as the afternoon crept toward evening, casting long shadows across the floor. They sat in that dimness, both lost in their own thoughts, neither knowing how to pull the other back. A while later, Jenny stood and walked toward the bedroom. Sumat stayed where he was, staring at the empty space she left behind. His heart pounded with something between panic and despair. He finally followed, stopping at the doorway. She was sitting on the bed, her back to him, shoulders slumped. He hesitated before speaking. "I know I've messed things up. I know I haven't always been honest with you about my fears. I get scared too, Jenny, more than you think." Okay. She closed her eyes slowly, absorbing his words. He continued, "Sometimes I worry I won't be enough for you. That I'll disappoint you. And instead of saying that, I pull away. I get defensive. I hide things because I think it'll protect us. But it just makes everything worse." Jenny turned her head slightly. Not enough to fully face him, but enough that he knew she was listening. He swallowed hard. "I don't want you to feel alone with me. I don't want you to think I don't care. Because I do. I care so much it scares me." Her eyes softened for a moment, just a flicker, but then the sadness returned. "Caring isn't the problem," she whispered. "It's consistency. It's trust. It's knowing you're moving with me, not against me, not behind me, not in circles." He stepped into the room slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. He sat at the far edge of the bed, leaving space between them, but close enough that they weren't worlds apart. "Tell me what you need," he said quietly. "Tell me what I can do right now today to make you feel safe again." She breathed out a long breath that felt like months of held emotion. "I need clarity. I need honesty without being pushed to the edge first. I need to know you're choosing this not because you're afraid to lose it, but because you want it. Because you want me." His lips parted, stunned by the simplicity and the depth of what she asked. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't impossible. He had just been too tangled in his own fears to see it clearly. "I do want you," he whispered. "I've always wanted you. I'm just scared. But that's not an excuse anymore. I know that." She looked at him, then really looked at him then. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the faintest hope that maybe this moment could be a turning point. before either of them could speak again. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She hesitated before reaching for it. When she glanced at the screen, her expression shifted, a kind of quiet shock blended with something like relief. Sumat noticed immediately. "What is it?" he asked, voice tight. Jenny didn't answer right away. She stared at the phone, breathing slowly, as if processing what she'd read. Then she finally met his eyes. "It's an email," she said softly. "From the visa office." His blood ran cold. The timing felt unreal. Too sudden, too symbolic. He felt the world tilt slightly as he sat there waiting for her to finish. "What does it say?" he asked, barely above a whisper. She looked down at the screen again, hesitating. "It says, my extension was approved, but they're reminding me it's the last one. After this, I have to make a final decision. Either stay permanently or leave." Her voice cracked at the last word. Something deep inside him clenched, like a thread snapping. The idea of her leaving had always been a distant threat, a possibility he avoided thinking about. But now, hearing it spoken out loud, hearing the finality in her voice, it felt like the walls around him were closing in. He leaned forward, panic rising in his chest. "You're not leaving." "Jenny, you can't." She held up a hand again. The same quiet, controlled gesture she'd used earlier. It silenced him instantly. "I'm not saying I'm leaving," she said. "I'm saying I can't make that decision based on fear or uncertainty. Not anymore. I need to know we're moving toward something real, something stable, something that won't collapse every time we hit a rough patch." He nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. He finally understood the full weight of what she'd been carrying and how much time they'd wasted avoiding the truth. She set the phone down and took a deep breath. "I'm giving us a chance," she said softly, "but it can't look like this. Something has to change." Her honesty struck him with both hope and devastation. He reached toward her, stopping just short of her hand, waiting to see if she would pull away. She didn't. Their fingers touched lightly, a fragile, trembling connection that felt like the first real moment between them in months. But the uncertainty still hung around them, thick and unspoken. The night settled in around the apartment. The lights stayed dim. Neither of them moved away. But neither spoke again for a long time. It was as if they were both sitting on the edge of a decision that could reshape everything, and even in the quiet. One truth echoed clearly inside both of them. Something was shifting, something they couldn't undo, something that would demand more honesty, more courage, more vulnerability than either had given before. But whether that shift would bring them closer, together, or pull them apart remained painfully uncertain. The tension was already thick the moment we walked into the tell-all studio. But nothing could have prepared anyone for how Matt completely lost it when he started talking about baby Matilda. You could see the panic in his eyes, the kind of panic that makes you question every single choice you've ever made. He wasn't just worried, he looked terrified. And let's be real, if you've been following this saga, you know why. The thought that the baby might not even be his hit him like a punch he didn't see coming. You won't believe how fast the room changed after that moment. Jasmine, on the other hand, stayed eerily calm. There was a confidence in her stance, almost as if she was thinking, let him sweat. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. But beneath that calm, you could feel the tension simmering. She's been through enough to know that controlling your own reactions can sometimes be the sharpest weapon in a messy relationship. She had to protect herself emotionally, legally, and yes, even socially, because the cameras were recording everything. By now, everyone in the audience was holding their breath, wondering what would happen next. Then Gino entered the frame, looking like a man caught between heartbreak and curiosity. He wasn't just there to stir the pot, he genuinely seemed torn. Watching him try to comfort Jasmine while keeping his own emotions in check added a layer of complexity that nobody expected. There's something about a former lover who knows your every weakness. It adds tension in a way that feels almost unbearable. The dynamic shifted immediately, because now we weren't just watching Matt freak out. We were watching a triangle of power, love, and betrayal play out in front of cameras. And every small glance or hesitation carried weight. Just when you think someone has the upper hand, everything can flip in a second. Matt's declaration about the expiration date he set for Jasmine wasn't just dramatic flair, it revealed a deep-rooted fear of rejection and a need to control the outcome. He was putting a deadline on love, turning it into a test rather than a shared journey. And the way Jasmine reacted said more than words ever could. Her expression, the slight raise of her eyebrows, the subtle tilt of her head, it all screamed that she was thinking, "Do you really believe I'm going to rush into something because of your fear?" At this point, even the audience started questioning who truly held the power. As the conversation escalated, Matt started spiraling, questioning whether he could trust Jasmine and if his entire future was being manipulated. Every line he uttered about the baby, about Jasmine's intentions, about his own mother's influence was dripping with anxiety and moral pressure. And here's where it got really juicy. Matt's mom had been pulling strings behind the scenes, adding a religious layer to the pressure. You could see how this amplified everything, making Matt feel like he had to make a decision not just for love, but for salvation in his family's eyes. The emotional stakes were now sky high, and no one could look away. Meanwhile, Jasmine wasn't just reacting, she was strategizing. She reminded everyone why she's survived to previous marriages and a public life under constant scrutiny. Her comments about never having truly trusted men and prioritizing the love she has from her mother and children made it clear. She wasn't about to be coerced into another commitment without reason. This wasn't defiance. This was self-preservation. Watching her navigate that conversation with Matt and Gino at the same time was like watching a chess game unfold at lightning speed. Each pause, each gaze, and each carefully chosen word was a move that could change everything. Then came the shocker, the paternity question. Matt's mind started racing, speculation flying about whether baby Matilda was really his or her ex-Dane's. The anxiety on his face was palpable, like he couldn't breathe without fearing the worst-case scenario. You could feel the audience lean in, everyone internally screaming, "How did it come to this?" The paternity question wasn't just about a baby, it was about trust, control, and whether the foundation of their entire relationship could withstand public scrutiny. And just when you thought he might settle down, the bombshell kept rolling. Gino, quietly observing, seemed to reach a new level of clarity. He admitted he finally felt like he could heal and move on. The irony is perfect. While Matt is panicking about control, Gino is finding peace in acceptance. It's a rare moment of emotional honesty in a room full of spectacle. Yet, this moment also made Matt's chaos feel even more extreme, highlighting just how much pressure he was under and how unprepared he might be for true partnership. The contrast between the calm of someone who's ready to let go and the frenzy of someone desperate to hold on made the next moments unbearable. The Tello stage became a battlefield of words, glances, and tiny power plays. Every time Matt tried to assert dominance, Jasmine would subtly push back, reminding him that she wasn't just a participant in his drama, she had her own narrative. And Gino's presence was a constant reminder of what she once had and what Matt might never provide. It was a live lesson in emotional dynamics, showing how past attachments and unresolved feelings can create a tangled web that is almost impossible to navigate in real time. Every second brought a new revelation, making it impossible to predict what would happen next. As the night progressed, Jasmine revealed details about the Romanian woman Matt's mother suggested, further complicating the narrative. Suddenly, Matt was forced to confront the fact that his timeline, ultimatums, and attempts at control could be unraveling in front of millions of viewers. His reactions ranged from shock to defensiveness, and it became painfully clear that every lie or half-truth now had consequences. Jasmine's questions weren't just about fidelity, they were about respect, honesty, and whether he could be trusted moving forward. The tension was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife dot at the same time. The cameras captured subtle moments of connection between Jasmine and Gino, Brief flashes of nostalgia and intimacy that made Matt's jealousy and confusion almost unbearable to watch. These moments weren't overtly dramatic, but their significance was huge. They highlighted the complexity of human emotion, showing how past bonds can linger and influence present decisions, especially under extreme pressure. For viewers, it became a test. Who will crumble first under emotional weight? Matt's breakdowns, Jasmine's assertiveness, Kate and Gino's quiet clarity all collided in a storm of raw emotion, morality, and real-world consequences. The show wasn't just about gossip anymore. It was about how people navigate betrayal, trust, and expectation in highly visible relationships. The audience could see patterns forming, recognize behavior that would be dangerous in any relationship, and reflect on how social, familial, and legal pressures can twist personal decisions into moral dilemmas. And every glance, hesitation, and word left viewers questioning what they would do in the same situation. By the end of the night, nothing was neatly resolved. The tension between past love, present loyalty, and future uncertainty hung in the air. Matt's tears, Jasmine's measured reactions, Gino's acceptance created a mosaic of human emotion that was raw, relatable, and addictive. It was a night where trust was tested, control was challenged, and the consequences of emotional decisions were laid bare for everyone to witness. And just when you think this story might settle, you realize the next move will completely redefine what comes next for all three. The aftermath didn't calm down either. Social media exploded with speculation about paternity, motivations, and loyalties. Fans were analyzing every frame, every word, and every pause. Some sided with Matt, citing fear and family pressure. Others championed Jasmine, highlighting autonomy, past trauma, and self-preservation. Gino's moments of clarity became rallying points for viewers who had been rooting for closure. It was a perfect storm of gossip, psychology, and spectacle that kept people coming back for more. No one could predict the fallout, and everyone wanted to see who would make the first move next. As the cameras finally turned off, the story left open questions that would dominate discussions for weeks. Would Matt finally trust Jasmine? Would Jasmine feel safe committing again? Could Gino truly move on without bitterness? The answers weren't obvious, and that uncertainty made every moment more intense. The audience was left emotionally invested, eagerly waiting for the next chapter, knowing full well that the combination of past grievances, current fears, and public exposure would make what happened next completely unpredictable. And that's the reason we all keep watching, because the human heart is messy, unfiltered, and impossible to control. Matt left the tell-all studio looking more defeated than anyone had ever seen him. His face, streaked with stress and confusion, told a story no words could fully capture. You could sense the weight of every ultimatum, every accusation, and every fleeting moment of doubt pressing down on him. The panic about baby Matilda had become something much bigger, a question about trust, about whether he could ever feel safe in a relationship again. Every viewer was glued to the screen, wondering if he could recover from this spiral. Jasmine, meanwhile, returned to her quiet composure. There was no victory dance, no smug satisfaction, just a calm that radiated experience. She knew the cameras could never fully capture the strength it took to remain centered while someone else loses themselves. In her silence, she sent a clear message. She would not be rushed, coerced, or manipulated. The audience could feel the tension between her quiet control and Matt's frantic energy, and it kept everyone on edge. The next confrontation came unexpectedly. Matt's attempt to reconcile didn't go as planned. He tried to justify his behavior, explaining that fear of the unknown had driven his ultimatums. But every word seemed to dig a deeper hole. He was so focused on controlling outcomes that he didn't realize he was alienating the very person he wanted to hold close. Jasmine's eyes reflected disbelief and exasperation. How could someone so invested in love simultaneously weaponize fear against the one they claimed to cherish? This tension made viewers question how far people go when fear overtakes affection. Then came the shocking moment with Gino. He hadn't planned to intervene, but his presence alone shifted the energy. His calm, measured words highlighted what was missing in Matt's approach: empathy and patience. While Matt reacted from fear, Gino's perspective offered clarity. Watching Jasmine navigate these contrasting energies, Matt's panic versus Gino's steadiness, was like watching a high-stakes psychological experiment unfold. Each interaction became a lesson in control, influence, and emotional intelligence, leaving viewers captivated. Matt's mother continued to play a subtle but powerful role. Her insistence on moral correctness and religious framing kept Matt in a loop of anxiety and obligation. Every decision he made now had a moral overlay, magnifying the stakes. The audience could see that Matt wasn't just struggling with trust in a partner, he was wrestling with the expectations of a family that demanded perfection in faith, commitment, and social perception. It created a fascinating dynamic where love, fear, and societal pressure collided. Drawing viewers deeper into the story, Jasmine, on the other hand, demonstrated remarkable resilience. She was thoughtful, assertive, and unapologetic about her needs. Her remarks about autonomy and prioritizing the love of her children reminded everyone why she had survived past challenges. This wasn't arrogance. It was strategy. She was showing Matt and the audience that self-preservation sometimes looks like calm decisiveness rather than explosive emotion. Viewers were left questioning their own boundaries and relationships. How much control is too much? And when does self-protection become essential? The conversation inevitably circled back to the Romanian woman Matt's mom had suggested. Jasmine didn't shy away from expressing concern, but she also refused to make assumptions. Her questions were pointed and logical, forcing Matt to examine his own decisions. It was uncomfortable, it was tense, and it was gripping. The cameras captured every subtle cue. Matt's clenched jaw, the sweat forming at his temples, the hesitation in his speech. Each moment was a window into the psychology of fear-driven behavior. The intensity made it impossible for viewers to look away, emotionally hooking them deeper into the drama. At one point, Matt broke down entirely. His words spilled out faster than his thoughts, revealing insecurities he hadn't intended to show. He admitted he felt trapped by past mistakes, parental expectations, and his own need to control outcomes. Jasmine didn't respond with mockery or scolding. She simply observed, letting the truth land where it needed to. This contrast was brutal in its honesty. Desperation versus composure, chaos versus clarity. The audience felt every heartbeat of tension, empathizing with the complexity of real human emotion. Then the conversation took another turn. Matt attempted to frame the ultimatum as love rather than fear, suggesting that deadlines were necessary for clarity. But Jasmine countered with something powerful. Love can't be enforced, it can only be chosen. The subtle, yet sharp exchange laid bare a universal truth that resonated with viewers. Controlling behavior often masquerades as affection, but true commitment requires freedom. By now, the drama was emotionally and intellectually engaging, keeping viewers invested in every word. Gino's brief intervention highlighted another aspect: the lingering effects of past relationships. His willingness to speak openly, without judgment, allowed Jasmine to feel seen and heard in ways she hadn't with Matt. The dynamic exposed how unresolved history can influence present choices, and how honesty and patience can sometimes create a stronger foundation than fear and pressure ever could. The audience was left reflecting on how much influence the past can wield in shaping current emotional landscapes. By mid-conversation, Matt was visibly exhausted. His attempts to regain control were failing, and the audience could see the frustration building. Jasmine's responses were precise, calm, and emotionally grounded. She wasn't just defending herself. She was establishing boundaries and expectations for the future. Every word, pause, and glance carried weight, underscoring the tension between power and vulnerability, panic and strategy, impulsiveness and reason. Viewers were riveted by the contrast, wondering if Matt could truly adapt or if this was the beginning of a permanent breakdown. The discussion naturally pivoted to future possibilities. Could trust be rebuilt? Could Matt learn patience and empathy, or was he too entrenched in fear-driven patterns? Jasmine's stance made it clear. Trust isn't given. It's earned, and actions matter more than promises. This wasn't a dramatic cliffhanger, it was a sober, real-world reflection of what many viewers have faced in their own relationships. The relatability elevated the drama from entertainment to emotional education. Audience engagement soared as viewers started evaluating their own boundaries and relationships through the lens of this unfolding story. Even small moments carried immense weight. A subtle eye roll, a brief pause, or a carefully chosen word all amplified the tension. Every second on camera felt like a calculated reveal, and the pacing kept the audience guessing. Matt's fluctuating emotions, Jasmine's measured confidence, and Gino's quiet wisdom formed a delicate triangle that was impossible to predict. Each moment felt like a mini reveal, pulling viewers along like a tightly wound. Emotional roller coaster. Jasmine's commentary about the implications of immigration, family pressure, and public scrutiny added another layer. The stakes weren't just emotional, they were legal and social as well. This made Matt's panic more understandable, but also underscored how ineffective control and ultimatums are in navigating real-world complications. Love cannot exist in a vacuum, and trying to force it under extreme circumstances only increases risk for everyone involved. The tension between practical reality and emotional desire kept viewers fully engaged, emotionally and mentally invested. As the night progressed, the audience saw the accumulation of small revelations, past mistakes, family expectations, public image, and personal boundaries all collided, creating a high-stakes emotional environment. The camera caught micro-expressions that conveyed as much as words, highlighting how human behavior under pressure can be both predictable and shocking. Each moment of silence carried suspense, each glance carried judgment, and each word carried the weight of possible consequences. By now, viewers were completely drawn into the psychological drama, unable to look away.